done next to nothing to assuage those concerns, and in fact, in some respects, has only exacerbated them. Democrats are howling over an Argentina newspaper report that says that Trump used his congratulatory phone call with the Argentinian president, Mauricio Macri, to ask for help with a stalled construction project that will bear his branding in Buenos Aires. The spokesman for Macri denies that that ever happened, but it's hardly the first accusation that Trump might use his new power to boost his family's bottom line. Last week, in between administration job interviews, Trump met with 3 Indian commercial partners who are building a luxury Trump office building south of Mumbai and, according to reports, seem eager to capitalize on their newly valuable connections to the president in waiting. The Washington Post reported that 100 foreign diplomats attended a sales pitch about the Trump International Hotel in Washington last week, and some of them consider the opportunity to spend bigly at the hotel an easy way to flatter the incoming POTUS. Separately, a Washington Post analysis of Trump's business dealings found that at least 111 Trump-related companies have done or are doing business in 18 countries across South America, Asia, and the Middle East. None of what Trump has done to this point appears to be illegal, but it certainly raises suspicions that he could, if he wanted to, profit financially from his occupancy in the highest office in the land. If only someone had told the president-elect that he might want to be a little more careful about the appearance of conflicts of interest.
Obviously, my assets were significantly smaller than some other presidents or president-elects, but we made a decision to liquidate assets that might raise questions about how it would influence policy. When I met with the president-elect, I suggested to him that having a strong White House counsel that could provide clear guideposts and rules would benefit him and benefit his team because it would eliminate a lot of ambiguity.
So given Trump's history, he's unlikely to be as scrupulous as Obama is encouraging to be. But Mark, my question for you is, what do you think the tipping point is for Trump maybe, possibly, to start taking these concerns and criticisms seriously?
This is all so unnecessary and so bad. It's not the right way to start. I think it's going to take a lot for him to change his ways. I think he wants to get rich off of being president, and will do everything he can as long as some lawyer tells him it's okay. I think the 3 possible tipping points, one would be if somebody gets indicted.
Two would wait that long?
Two would be if a member of his family says this is hurting our brand.
Yeah.
But I think the most likely way, and hopefully the best way, is he hires a White House counsel who tells him, as a la the Trump University settlement, this stuff is just going to be a distraction and irritant and maybe worse. We got to put a stop to it and do what the Wall Street Journal editorial board said or something like it, and reorganize the company to make it as blind and as cut off from government as possible.
Wow. Well, that's a pretty, I believe you just said, let's go back to the top. I believe you just said you think it's clear that Trump intends to profiteer off of the presidency. Is that right?
I think I don't think it's why he ran, but I think he clearly...
That's what he intends to do now.
I think he thinks he can without being punished or...
With impunity. With impunity, you think he can get away? He thinks he can get away with this.
Yeah.
So I think that's obviously pretty outrageous, if true. I don't disagree that all the signs are horrible, and if the guy does not want to be enmeshed in scandal and constant accusations of this kind, that this is what he's doing, he must do then what seems like the only thing that is proper, which is what the Wall Street Journal editorial page that you cited a second ago, we haven't gone into a lot of detail about that, but it basically said you got to liquidate the company. You got to do an IPO, you got to melt it down, and then put it into a blind trust and keep your kids out of the position of being involved with managing that money and then being involved in the federal government.
You know,
now, I know you think
when he'll do that?
I know when monkeys fly out of a place that I can't talk about on television, but it is the only solution.
But let's live in the world now. Let's live in the world now where he's not going to do that, because I don't think he's going to do that. What can we expect?
Again, if he's going to be a profiteering president, if that's what he's going to do openly and thinking he can do it with impunity, he's going to be mired in scandal throughout the entirety of his administration.
I bet he's looking at Lyndon Johnson and Harry Reid two guys who got much wealthier while they were in public office.
Yeah.
And he's like, everybody does this.
Yeah.
What's the big deal?
Well, clearly, both of those analogies are there. It is true they both got wealthier, as have a lot of people while in office, but none of them were multi-billionaire occupants of the Oval Office who then used the presidency in a blatant way to try to profiteer.
I'm a little worried about this. I hope that's clear.
Yes, I think you seem concerned. I think you're right to me.
The spectacle that is Donald Trump's transition process went through another weekend as a parade of potential hires dropped in on the president-elect at his country club in Bedminster, Jersey. Job seekers, including former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney, Marine Corps General retired James Mattis, and others, were greeted at the front door by Trump himself, who also made sure to toss a quick wave to the shivering cold press corps that was on stakeout outside. There were a few statements by some of the comers, some of the goers, but the body language between Trump and his visitors alone was, for many, riveting, even though in most cases it only lasted for a few seconds, like here. Today, back at Trump Tower, the stakeout continued. There were cameos from the former Texas governor, Rick Perry, who you saw there getting in the elevator, the former Massachusetts Senator, Scott Brown, and the current governor of Oklahoma, Mary Fallin. And yet, still no new announcements or appointments since last week. So, John, what do you think's holding up the additional release of white smoke from the chimney atop Trump Tower?
Well, I would like to think that what's holding it up is that they're doing careful vetting and trying to figure things out. And everything that people from inside that world are saying suggests that's true. I'm willing to take them at face value. And as you know, my view is that there are two big jobs in a transition. One is figuring out who the 4,000 people are going to staff the government. I still think they're way behind on that front. But on the front of making major appointments, they are, historically speaking, not behind. And I'm not in any hurry for them to get to the right decisions. I'm worried about some of their appointments that have happened so far. But the speed at which they're taking on the major jobs does not concern me at this moment.
Yep. Look, if they get Romney and Mattis, they're going to have an easier time in the national security side recruiting. Let's see what happens in some of the domestic policy appointments. I will say this. The media is complaining about the parade of people. If these meetings were all in secret, the press would complain about
I agree. I couldn't care less.
Couldn't care less. And we get access to see who's coming and going.
Couldn't care less.
So I don't really like the complaints about that. I will say this. You know, we're waiting for this video they're supposed to put out to talk about policy. Right. And I do think he should start having press conferences, start doing interviews. The personnel stuff, I agree with you. I'm in no rush. If everybody's there by Christmas, which is the deadline they set, and as you said, the top jobs are concerned, but so are all the other jobs. But if you pick good people at the top, you'll have a much easier time recruiting. I've talked to a number of Republicans over the last few days and the end of last week who said, look, if somebody like Mitt Romney, Secretary of State, you'll have a much easier time recruiting people into this government.
Right. What we have, though, right now among these appointments is we don't have any ideological diversity as of now, all hardliners, and we don't have any other kind of diversity at all. And again, I'm not for a quota system. I'm for qualified people. But there are millions of non-white and female Americans who are worried about the direction of the Trump administration. And as long as every appointment is a hardliner ideologically and an old white man, those people are just going to keep getting more and more worried. So again, he has plenty of big jobs to fill. So, it's still early. But right now, you can feel and talking to African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and women who are looking at the group makeup right now, and some of the people being considered, you can feel their concern. Even those who want Trump to succeed, you can feel their concern rising.
Not just because I like stuff to cover and video for this program, but I think it's good when you make major announcements, particularly some of these people who are not well known, that they do what past administrations in waiting have done. Have a public announcement, make a statement about them out of your own voice of why you chose them. Let them say a few words. I just think that's a tradition that has real meaning. The country deserves to get to start to know the people who are going to staff this cabinet. I really wish they would go back to that tradition of doing it.
Right, someone like Pompeo, right, not a well-known figure in America who now is going to wield vast influence.
Even just let him thank his family and say how he looks forward to his confirmation. I'd still like to hear from him.
I agree with that. All right, up next, we'll put all of these questions to Trump transition advisor and former campaign manager Kellyanne Conway. We'll be right back with that.
From Bedminster to Trump Tower, our next guest has been behind the scenes fixture of Donald Trump's transition deliberations throughout. Kellyanne Conway, former campaign manager, currently is a senior advisor to transition, and maybe she's going to Washington, D.C. Who knows? She joins us now from Trump Tower. Kellyanne, what is the proper line for Donald Trump to draw regarding his business interests when he becomes president?
Whatever the legal lines dictate, of course. He will comply with all of that, and he's made clear all along, Mark and John, that his adult children, Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric, will be managing the family business. Obviously, these are not entry-level positions. They're already respected executives and mentees of his within the business, in charge of building things, acquiring things, taking meetings. You've seen their handiwork. I think the old post office building in D.C. is a great example of under budget, on time work that these adult children do, and they'll do that. I mean, he's made that clear. He's got a team of advisors and lawyers and accountants who will make sure he complies with the law. President
Obama suggested complying with the law is not necessarily good enough standard. Is he just going to comply with the law? Or is he going to worry about appearances as well when there's an intersection between public actions and his business interests? Just the law or appearances as well?
That's a typical response of a politician who's not been a successful businessman and job creator. Apart from that, I think he has to comply with the law, and that should be the appearance. In other words, people will know that he's got a full-time job as President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief. He's committed to that. He's already said he won't take a salary. I guess he'll donate that to charity. But there's no reason, other than those who still think the campaign is in full force, to believe that this man is lying or won't do what he's supposed to do upon taking office.
So, Kellyanne, I just want to stay on that because the Wall Street Journal editorial board, which you were just talking about, wrote a very strong editorial on this, or a strongly worded editorial about this. They are not professional politicians, and they have been, as you know, both friendly to conservatives and certainly friendly to capitalism. The argument that they made in their op-ed, or in their editorial was that the political damage to the administration if Mr. Trump doesn't liquidate his business holdings could be extensive. He's going to be constantly scrutinized for having pecuniary motives for any action that he takes on of a wide variety of different policies that affect a wide variety of different countries and a wide variety of different issues. So is the Wall Street Journal, when it is arguing from the perspective of wanting him to succeed, not being critical of him, do you think that there's no merit to that argument, that it would be the safest thing just to liquidate the assets and move forward with a clean slate?
Well, two things. First, we already know what his policy positions are. He made them very clear. He has a 100-day plan. So if you're talking about the fact that he wants to create 25 million jobs over 10 years and unleash coal and shale and natural gas and other energy sources, or have big infrastructure projects that even Democrats are excited about, John, then if you're assigning then a possible pecuniary motive to that, with his business holdings, we already know what he stands for. It's not like he's going to invent policy based on things that would benefit a business that he's no longer is involved in or temporarily not involved in. But secondly, and I think more importantly, is that as President of the United States, he will have no authority whatsoever over what is happening in his business, what the acquisitions are. And I think that the most important point I would make about all this, people never look at the other side of the ledger. How many tens of millions of dollars has Donald J. Trump and his family lost and sacrificed for him to run for president? First of all, he spent a lot of his money, but secondly, deals have been in abeyance. I mean, people haven't completed deals. They haven't been able to pursue other deals with the 3 adult children on the campaign trail, keeping their own schedule quite successfully, helping to get their father elected, and him being away from his business for a year and a half to do this, and now for the next 4 or 8. So it's actually the money they've lost that nobody wants to talk about, not the money they would gain based on different positions.
But Kellyanne,
I just think
he decided to run for president voluntarily, so those sacrifices are a sacrifice he decided to take on himself. I think the question about policy doesn't go to the broad questions of job creation. It goes to the questions of what rulings that the EEOC would make, that the National Labor Relations Board would make, that are all going to have Trump appointees, all listening to Mr. Trump, where specific hotels, specific business interests of his would be affected by regulatory rulings, by legal rulings, foreign policy with respect to specific countries, like a particular country in South America or in Asia. All of those decisions have not been laid. He's not laid out his policy in advance on those questions. And as he makes decisions on them now, if they have a financial impact on his family company, they will be called into question if he makes decisions that seem to benefit his businesses.
It sounds like they'll be called into question even if he hasn't done that, because you're calling them into question. Look, John, I know the election results are very tough to swallow, particularly for those of you who just couldn't see it coming, couldn't even conceive of the possibility that the other candidate may actually win, that you don't understand America. This man understands America, animated America, and now will represent all Americans. But this whole line of argument is presumptively negative and presumptively accusatory.
With all due respect, Kellyanne, this has nothing to do with me or my views. I'm reading you from a Wall Street Journal editorial.
Yes, it does.
A big champion of capitalism.
No,
the Wall Street Journal editorial, but they really did. You should read the editorial. That's exactly the argument they're making for liquidating his assets. And this has nothing to do with the election results. This has everything to do with standards.
No. You're presuming, well, a lot of this does, but because I think some people are still in campaign mode and have like political PTSD, I guess. But the fact is that this guy, you're accusing him of doing things. He's not even in the Oval yet, and you're accusing him of making policies based on things that aren't even that he's not even talking about. You're presuming that he's doing this for the wrong reasons, where most Americans that voted for him, 300 and some electoral votes, that ain't nothing, believe that he is actually going to go there and work for them, not line his own pockets. And I find the line of argument, it's your show, you're welcome to do it, of course, I respect that enormously, but I find the line of argument to be presumptively accusatory.
We'll talk more about this with you, I'm sure, in the coming days, but let's switch to a new topic that's being reported by NBC News and others. Rudy Giuliani reportedly being considered to be Director of National Intelligence. Is that true, and would he be good at that job?
He'd be great at any number of jobs, and the first criterion, of course, for President-elect Trump in appointing anyone to his cabinet or senior staff is that you're qualified and capable to do the job on day one. That certainly applies to Mayor Giuliani on any number of fronts. Secondly, I know he was out in Bedminster yesterday for a number of hours. I was there as well. He had a great conversation with his friend and ally, the President-elect.
Is he being considered for Director of National Intelligence?
He's being considered for any number of positions.
Is that one of them?
Could be. I mean, I think that's definitely for somebody who is expert in those areas, intelligence gathering, security. He obviously is well respected around the world. He would command a certain presence as representing the President-elect and his administration. But the fact is that when the President-elect is filling his cabinet, he has to think about how everybody's working together, and he has to think about who is the best person for each of those jobs. And to John's other point before I got on the show, I think the diversity of people who have come through the door, literally come through the door here at Trump Tower and out in Bedminster this weekend, is just a remarkable group of men and women from different political and socioeconomic and business and public sector, private sector backgrounds, certainly different races and ethnicities, different religious persuasions. It's been quite an impressive group of people who, in many cases, just want to come and offer advice and counsel and vision for the country, share their experiences, the work they've done on a core issue or issues over the years. And for some, that will lead or could lead to formal positions in this administration. But for all of them, I assure you, they're just happy to have the time with the President-elect and the Vice President-elect to share their ideas and offer their support. We're also thrilled that includes people from the other side of the aisle, like Representative Tulsi Gabbard. It includes revered businessmen like BET President Robert Johnson. It includes people who are at the highest levels of government, like Kathy McMorris Rodgers, the highest-ranking woman in Congress, who gave birth while in Congress 3 times. I mean, she's got a remarkable personal and professional story. So they just keep coming, and they're governors, and they're senators, and they're members of Congress, past and present. They're people who are captains of industry. They're folks who have been job creators. They're folks who have been job seekers. It's just an incredible collection of men and women, and thank you for covering it.
Kellyanne, we've not heard from Donald Trump since election night, and that's relatively long by normal standards for presidents-elect. He has not done a press conference, not done a speech since then. Is there a reason why he's obviously a very voluble guy normally? So is there a reason why why he's not done that, and when can we expect to hear from him?
I think you'll hear from him soon, but he's incredibly busy. I mean, John, we publish his schedule every day. You could see it just is one after another after another. The guy works 18 hours a day, and he's got this punishing schedule of interviews. When he's not interviewing people in person, he's taking calls from across the nation and the globe, from heads of state and from other opinion leaders. And so he's just been incredibly busy doing all that and then reflecting and discussing the interviews he's just had and the advice he's just received. So he'll talk to the press in due time. But today we had an amazing meeting here, an off-the-record meeting with the top executives and anchors from the 3 major networks and a couple of the cable stations, and I thought he very much enjoyed that discussion. I thought it was a fabulous opportunity for them to be with each other. And so we have the press here in the lobby every day. They have access to any number of different people coming in and out of Trump Tower. We make many people available to them, people who are meeting with President-elect Trump and people who represent him like me. And so we feel like we are very accessible to the press, and we feel like this is a very transparent process where you literally can see the people coming in and out of the 2 buildings as they meet with the president-elect.
Has a single thing gone wrong during the transition so far?
Not really, no. I mean, I could tell you it's high energy, very engaged, a great deal of excitement, but the excitement is now being funneled into the very serious business of helping him to make decisions on his cabinet and his senior staff. I was down in Washington, D.C. last week and visited our 2 transition offices there. That's where most of our transition team is. They're in Washington, D.C., steps away from the White House. And they are, it's really remarkable to me anyway to see people standing shoulder to shoulder, millennials who were born after Ronald Reagan left office and men and women who served on President Reagan's transition team and indeed in his administration. People are really excited that they got a Republican, frankly, a conservative president to govern, and conservative vice president certainly. And there's just this buzz of activity and focus. And those people who nobody's paying attention to what they're doing, they're getting on the landing teams, they're making sure that everything at the different agencies is as it should be. They make sure that they're working with President Obama and his current administration on these very important decisions and very important activities. So it's very exciting to all of us who are involved in it, and I will tell you it's going incredibly smoothly. It's like the interview, it's like scheduling the interviews version of rallies for President-elect Trump. He just can't get enough of them.
They're telling me you got to go, but I got to ask you about one report in the New York Post real quick. It says that during the meeting today with the network anchors and executives, that Donald Trump exploded at them in anger, at least at one point. Is that true?
No, that's not true at all. I sat right to his left. He did not explode in anger. And by the way, it's an off-the-record meeting, so whoever said that and mischaracterized it should think thrice. But no, he did not explode in anger. He's the president-elect. He won. Winning finishes a lot of sentences. Winning solves a lot of problems. Winning makes a lot of statements. And I'm really happy that he reached out to them after a very long and bruising, hard-fought, and not always fairly covered campaign.
Kellyanne, thank you.
And now, as the president-elect, he'll be dealing with the media, including Bloomberg.
Okay, Kellyanne, thank you so much for taking wasn't just potential Trump administration officials at the tower today. The president-elect held off-the-record conversations, a big conversation with some major media types, including several high-profile network executives and anchors, including Lester Holt of NBC News, Charlie Rose of CBS, Wolf Blitzer of the cable news network, and ABC's George Stephanopoulos. The New York Post reported tonight that the meeting did not go all that well. They said Trump occasionally lashed out at some of the participants. Kellyanne Conway denied that a few moments ago. Trump has done only one-on-one interview on camera since he became president-elect. He has had no press conferences. And as Phil Rucker of the Washington Post points out, he's not done any victory rallies, no thank you tour, no Veterans Day event, or even indoor photo ops since he became the next leader of these United States. So far, every person he's hired for his White House team or proposed to the cabinet has been announced by a written statement. You heard Kellyanne Conway just a few minutes ago say that Trump's, quote, punishing schedule was just too packed for him to make public appearances now. So, John, do you buy the notion that he's just too busy doing other things, or is there some other reason he's staying off camera?
I do not. I do not buy the notion that he's too busy to do some things on camera, just because all presidents-elect are busy, and many of them in the past have found time to address the American people or do a press conference. I was not actually, when I asked Kellyanne about this, I was not like arguing for press conferences per se, although I think it would be good if he did them. But he hasn't done a speech, he hasn't done any of the things that you just retailed. I just think that, to your point earlier in the show, these appointments would benefit him to contextualize them, to explain them, to make the argument for some of these somewhat controversial people. Michael Flynn is a controversial guy. Jeff Sessions is a controversial guy. To make the argument for them, at least in a brief way, kind of set up the discussion for what his motives were, would be smart. I think, and then he's always finding time to tweet about Hamilton. So it's not like he's so busy he couldn't make a little time to explain what's going on. I think it would benefit him and the country.
My theory is he's enjoying doing what he wants to do. He's enjoying these meetings. Yeah. He enjoys the notion of putting together his government and having all this power and, the media speculation, all that. And I think when you run for president, particularly for someone who's never done this before, a lot of his day was filled with, you have to get on the plane at this time. You have to fly to this place. You have to highly
He's less scheduled now than he was then.
Yeah, he is. And I think he's just enjoying the fact that he doesn't have to, perform in public, and he's taking a break from it.
Well, and also likes he's home. There's some part of that. I don't think this is, again, one of these things that I don't think it's disastrous that he's not done more. It's just odd, given how voluble he has been in so many other settings when he used to be on television wall to wall. Part of the secret of his political success was his availability.
Well, except that he basically did one or two events a day for most of the campaign.
Well, right.
Again, I think that he likes to dole out portions of Trump on his own timetable. Yeah. And right now, there's just no reason for it. And I do think he's having an extraordinary number of meetings.
Yes.
He obviously could fit in a public appearance a day, but he's just choosing not to.
I'm not going to ask you to call Kellyanne Conway a liar, but having just read that New York Post story, given the multiple sources, all on background, but given the multiple sources confirming the contentiousness of the meeting, again, without impugning Kellyanne's credibility, the story reads, unlike some stories in the tabloids, that story reads, there's a lot of consistency throughout the accounts they offer there.
Unless the sources were Trump officials, shame on the people who agreed to go to an off-the-record meeting and shared the accounts of it. Yep. But yes, it does appear to be there's at least a disparity in the accounts.
There have been some,
but I do know
there have been some people who've gone to off-the-record meetings who've shared those accounts with us. I wouldn't want to shame them too much.
I can tell you this. He is mad at CNN. I can tell you that.
Well, I think he's pretty mad at a lot of people, and I think he's feeling his oats right now.
I would say he's particularly mad at CNN.
Well, I'm sure that's
not to diminish how mad he is at other people. Yeah. But I think he's particularly mad at CNN.
Yeah. All right. President Obama may not be saying sayonara to politics just yet. The New York Times reported today that the president is rethinking his plans to become a political hermit once he leaves the Oval Office in January, citing White House aides who say that he may occasionally go after Trump head on if he feels as if his legacy is being unraveled by the next president. So, Mark, what do you think? We've been covering Barack Obama for a long time now. What do you think the likelihood is that these intimations that he might be a very active political participant in his post-presidency. What do you make of those? You think that's likely?
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
I think that he'll move on to, I think for two reasons he won't be doing this. One is he's going to move on to doing other things.
Yeah.
And I think regardless of how Donald Trump conducts himself in office, I think his instinct, which he'll gravitate back to, was to be more like President Bush than President Clinton, and basically say a post-president should not be critics in chief of their successors.
I also think it's the case that President Obama is highly rational, and the extent to which he actually do anything to prevent the unraveling of his legacy is limited. I think he's more likely to do what he's always thought he was going to do, which is focus on writing that book in which he will make the case for his legacy on the page. And I think he thinks that's probably more powerful and more lasting than anything he can do in the short term from out of office.
Yeah, the other thing is, I think he will be convinced, if he's not on his own by others, that he needs to make way for other Democrats who are future leaders to be in the front lines of going up against Donald Trump, and not try to do it as an ex-president. But I think he believes now that, as he's saying it, I think he thinks he's going to do it. But like I said, I'll believe it when I see it.
It was interesting, I will say this, to make the counterpoint to our general instinct about this. It was interesting, I would say, at the end of this election season, when I felt like he kept saying he was going to campaign a lot, but I thought, like, when it really came to it, he wouldn't do very much. He ended up doing more than I thought he was going to do. And so he may get drawn back in.
That's the full apparatus of the presidency.
I understand.
When something concrete was on the line, where his actions could have had an effect on the outcome.
I agree with you about
much more amorphous.
I agree with you about where my instincts are, but there's something about Donald Trump that has brought out a side of Barack Obama that is not the side that we have come to know over the course of reporting on him. I just want to leave open the small possibility that he might find it irresistible to dive back in. Just the small possibility.
I have three words for you.
Yeah.
DNC, that's one word.
Yeah.
Chair.
Yeah.
Biden.
Yeah.
We'll
really?
See. We'll see.
Really?
We will see.
That'd be hot.
Yeah, we'll
That'd
see.
Be smoking
All right.
hot.
We'll have a reporters roundtable without the table, but it's a good group of reporters. You won't want to miss it. That's coming up in just a moment after these words from our fabled sponsors.
We're joined now by a quadrangle, and I love that word, a quadrangle of reporters following Donald Trump and his transition. NBC correspondent Katie Tur is here in New York City. in various Washington, D.C. bureaus. We have the political reporter from the Washington Post, Matea Gold, Bloomberg's own Sahil Kapoor, and the political reporter for the New York Times, soon to be with the Washington Post, Ashley Parker. Ashley Parker, congratulations on that move. You were already a star, but you're going to be supernova when you get to the Washington Post. So I'll start with you, Ashley Parker, since you're
in the news today.
In the news today, correct. You've been covering Donald Trump for a pretty long time. Watching him in the transition, what do you make of the way in which he's conducting himself and his transition so far?
What's striking to me is that he's sort of conducting himself in his transition exactly the way he did his candidacy, right? He's tweeting a ton about things he doesn't like, although maybe his tweets carry a little more power as the president-elect. He's sort of holed up in Trump Tower, which is those of us who covered him and had to return to New York every night so he could be there, remember, is sort of his favorite and most comfortable space. He's in his office where he still sort of has that same open-door policy with his aides and his children kind of shuffling in and out. So for people who thought that he was going to win the White House and become a different Donald Trump, that simply hasn't happened.
Kate Tur, I asked the same question to you at this point. Is Trump conducting his transition in the way you expected, or is he doing things that you think are in some way new or out of character with the old Trump?
I think you know what my answer is, John. And my answer is this is the same Donald Trump that we saw on the campaign trail. It's somebody who doesn't abide by the traditional trappings of politics. He's not announcing people in a lavish press conference. He's not doing things the traditional way. He's parading folks in and out of Trump Tower and in and out of his golf course. He's enjoying the suspense of it. He's enjoying seeing people talk all day on television about who might fill these roles. He's enjoying seeing how folks react to various people in roles. I would bet that he is taking into account the reactions of the media and his supporters and followers on Twitter about various positions that he is trying to fill and who might fill those positions. So this does not seem like a different Donald Trump to me at all. Again, he's still tweeting about the media. He still seems to have quite a thin skin when it comes to perceived slights. So I don't think we should expect a new and improved, or you want to say improved, or just a different Donald Trump going forward. Right.
Matea, let me ask you about forget about for the moment at least, about potential appointments and names that have been floated around. We have some appointments at this point, right?
Right.
Of the ones that we currently know, people who have been named, are any of them in any genuine political jeopardy as we turn towards this becoming an actual administration?
Well, it doesn't appear that there's going to be the votes, obviously, on the Democratic side to hold things up very much. And as much as I think we're going to hear a lot of debate about some of the controversial statements made by some of these nominees, you know, this is a Republican administration turning to a Republican Congress with their appointments, and I think they're going to find a lot of support. One thing that is striking to me is the message that he sent very early on with these appointments. I mean, everyone was sort of waiting for a nod to, you know, an olive branch to a rival or a sign that he was going to immediately bring in a woman or a person of color. I mean, he has sent a message that he's bringing in some very hardline people into this administration, and that's exactly what he said he was going to do. So I think we're seeing him follow through on those promises.
Sahil, you got Jeff Sessions as one of the big four cabinet agencies who's been picked. Tell me about, I know you're writing about this. Tell me about where the Sessions nomination is headed.
John, I think in addition to what Katie pointed out, that, you know, Trump is approaching his transition and seems like he would govern much the way he campaigned, I think that's true both on a personality level and I think it's true on a policy level as well. The Sessions pick speaks to this very clearly. Sessions has been a strong anti-immigration figure in the Senate. He's also very much against trade deals. Reflects Trump's platform. You have someone like Mike Pompeo, the nominee for CIA director, who's spoken favorably about waterboarding, said it's not torture, contrary to what a lot of other experts believe. You have General Michael Flynn, who, like Trump, has said some very negative things about Muslims. So I think the early signals Trump is sending is that he's going to try to carry out the promises that he made. And Jeff Sessions, as Attorney General, would have significant authority to create a climate around the issue of immigration, not only illegal immigration, but legal immigration. In other words, going after companies that try to hire foreign workers, going after businesses that try to lure investors with the promise of a green card. So there's a lot that Sessions can do. on behalf of the new Trump administration that fulfills his policies to crack down on the issue of immigration, which was a centerpiece of his platform.
Ashley, you covered both the Trump campaign and also covered the Romney campaign. That is the one job that everybody's been focused on a lot for the last 72 hours. There's mixed reporting. Either this could just be all window dressing, or Mitt Romney might be the front runner. What do you know?
So you're exactly right. From Trump's people, we've sort of heard that mixed message. Most of the people I've actually spoken with have said this is a very serious meeting. This isn't just a sort of bipartisan olive branch or for show. Although I did talk to one senior advisor who said, look, this is, Mitt Romney coming to kiss the ring and pay his respects and sort of, Trump kind of enjoying this show of potential groveling from Mitt Romney. But I can certainly tell you on the Romney side, everyone believes this is very real, and I think it's something that he's considering how he would respond if he would offered this job. And the one thing you have to understand about Mitt, because everybody has, played those clips of him sort of really going after Trump in a way you don't expect from Governor Romney, but is that he feels, in addition to being very ambitious, he feels a deep and acute call to public service. And I think if he was offered and he did say yes, that would be the motivating factor for someone like him. Right.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with all of you. Ashley, Matea, Sahil, Katie, everybody, hang out. You get Mark Halpern next. Right after this.
Back with our giant powerhouse, supercalifragilistic panel of reporters. Ashley Parker, formerly of the Black and White, now of the New York Times, soon to be of the Washington Post. Matea Gold, her future colleague at the Washington Post, our Bloomberg colleague Sahil Kapoor, and Katie Tur of the Peacock Web. Katie, you've never covered a transition before, as is true, I think, of everybody here on the panel. So it's hard to know what's normal and what's not. How is the Trump transition different to cover than the Trump campaign?
Well, the Trump transition is not that much different. They are still maintaining a relative secrecy around how they do things. They're trying to get a better relationship, or at least a better communication path between reporters and the Trump team than they were, I think, in the primaries or during the campaign, I can say. But there does seem to be a level of disorganization to it. They didn't know that they had to tell reporters when Donald Trump was going out for dinner. The definition of a lid seemed to be a little bit beyond them. There still are a lot of questions surrounding how they will govern, as there was during the campaign. And there are questions about Donald Trump's own promises and vows during the campaign, specifically when it comes to what he was going to do with his business. He said multiple times on the campaign trail that he would give his business to his children, and that would be the end of it if he were to win. We found that about 2 weeks into this transition now, he hasn't quite given up the business. A number of reports out that he met with business partners in India while they were here in the United States, talking to them. Also, Ivanka and Jared Kushner sat in on Donald Trump's meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister. Now we have a word that he may have discussed something about his business in Argentina when the president of Argentina called to congratulate him. The president of Argentina pushing back on that claim, saying they did not talk about anything other than brief congratulations for Donald Trump winning. So in the respect that there are still a lot of unanswered questions and there still is very little clarity and very little access to the candidate himself, that is pretty status quo is what we were seeing during the campaign. He has not had a press conference, guys, since the middle of the Democratic National Convention. That was in July. It's been over 100 days since then.
Matea, what's your sense of if the role moneyed interests are playing in this transition as compared to the norm for both parties?
Well, one thing that they also did not seem prepared for is how to immediately put in place his pledge to drain the swamp. Immediately attention turned to his transition that was stocked with lobbyists. They claim that they have cleaned house, but we have actually reported that some lobbyists have just deregistered but are still taking part in the transition. And he's also considering major donors for cabinet positions. So I think that they are still finding their way and trying to figure out how to stay true to this pledge. And it's going to be a real challenge both on the donor and lobbyist front and, as Katie mentioned, when it comes to his own business empire. I mean, this idea that he's going to have his business basically transfer the management over to his children, which is what he said, but there's no talk of changing any ownership, I think raises a lot of serious questions when it comes to foreign conflicts of interest.
Ashley, I believe Kellyanne Conway said that Donald Trump's meeting with the New York Times tomorrow. You know anything about that?
I know a little bit about that. I mean, the one thing generally that's interesting about Donald Trump and his relationship with the New York Times, and I believe that it was the Trump campaign who requested the meeting, is that for as much as he loves to tweet about the failing New York Times and to call out Times reporters by name and be very critical, the reason is because he cares. He gets up and he reads the New York Post and he reads the New York Times, and he is acutely aware of what the paper says about him, positive and negative. And as much as he claims to dislike the Times, whatever the Times writes deeply affects him to the point where he can remember, critical sentences, past the jump, many paragraphs down in a way that I think might surprise people.
Do you know, is he meeting with reporters and editors or just editors?
I believe he's meeting with, I think the publisher will be there. I think he's meeting with reporters and editors, and I think it may be a small off-the-record session and also on the record.
You expect there'll be any yelling at that?
As you know, Donald Trump is often, for all of his public sort of posture and bluster, he is often trying to win over the room he is immediately in. So I would imagine if he behaves that way tomorrow, there actually will not be a ton of yelling.
Yeah. So we see this New York Post report that the meeting today with network executives and anchors on the TV side, according to the New York Post, was quite contentious. Kellyanne Conway, who was present, claimed it wasn't. You think it's possible that it was contentious?
Absolutely. I would be surprised if it wasn't. The question is just how contentious it got, and according to this report, it got very intense and it got very heated. It sounds to me like the Trump's transition team and his eventual administration is trying to set a marker in the ground against the media. They're trying to It's been a long time, and I think it's unusual for a president-elect to even go this long without having a press conference to kind of, clue people in and give people a sense of where things are going. So I think he's suggesting that he's going to run things his own way, and it remains to be seen how well that works for him.
Amen. Hallelujah. Happy Thanksgiving to all four of you, and congratulations again to the Ashley Parker. John and I will be right back.
Those reporters, what do you think about them?
Oh, I like all four of them.
They were fantastic, don't you think?
They're like the Four Musketeers.
Yeah.
Without D'Artagnan.
It was pretty great. You got to check out BloombergPolitics.com for some reporting on which Wall Street veterans are advising Donald Trump through this transition period. Wall Street veterans in the Trump administration. Hard to believe. Coming up on Bloomberg Technology, PwC retail and consumer leader Steve Barr and Brookings Institute VP Daryl West.
Daryl.
Until tomorrow, from Mark and I, we say to you, sayonara.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of first word news. An earthquake with a preliminary magnitude of 7.3 has struck off the coast of Fukushima Prefecture in Japan. A tsunami warning for waves up to 10 feet has been issued. Fukushima Prefecture is north of Tokyo and home to the nuclear power plant that was destroyed by a tsunami following an offshore earthquake in 2011. Bloomberg Technology will have more on this story in a few moments. President-elect Donald Trump spent Monday holding meetings with potential cabinet members. Senior advisor Kellyanne Conway was asked about the level of diversity among the talent pool.
He's met with women and people of color this past weekend. He's met with them here, he's met with them in Bedminster. I've been present at both of those. And we're really just very heartened and very touched by the number of people and diversity, including people from across the aisle, people who are traditionally more democratic and progressive.
The United Nations humanitarian chief says conditions in rebels-held Aleppo in Syria have gone, quote, from terrible to terrifying and now barely survivable. Stephen O'Brien told the UN Security Council food is scarce with prices getting higher and higher. Fuel and gas for cooking reportedly unavailable in most neighborhoods. From New York, I'm Mark Crumpton. Bloomberg Technology is next.
And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, the post-election party continues. The 4 major U.S. stock indexes hit records today for the first time in 17 years. Plus, let the doorbusters begin. The biggest shopping days of the year are almost here. We'll tell you just how big Black Friday and Cyber Monday could be. And Symantec buys identity protection company LifeLock in a move to create a consumer cybersecurity powerhouse. We'll look at details of the proposed deal. But first, I want to get to some breaking news. We are monitoring a magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck Japan off the coast of Fukushima, home to the nuclear power plant, badly damaged in March 2011 after the biggest quake ever recorded in Japanese history and that ensuing tsunami we all remember. This time, a tsunami alert has been triggered again. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg's Tokyo bureau chief on the phone, Kazunori Takada, joining us now from Tokyo. So what exactly is the latest on the damage so far? We're looking right now, Kazunori.